Welcome back. This is the continued coverage of the life and times, the legacy and the farewell of former President Mwai Kibaki, who is of course going to be remembered as instrumental in forming the Kenya that we all live in today. With me in studio, taking a look at some of the wins that the President was able to achieve throughout his career as a statesman, is Dr. Exen Iraki, a senior economist, as well as governance and political analyst Michael Agwanda. We are taking a look at some of the events of his career, and it didn't just start when he became president in 2003. He actually was part of the governance of this country long before that. And a very interesting element of that is that he was running treasury in his 30s, something that is unheard of in the Kenya of today, or quite rare in the Kenya of today. Speak to us about his approach to the economy long before we knew him as the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. Exen.
That's a very important observation, Trix, because the generation of Mwai Kibaki is a very unique one.
Yes.
And I don't think we should ever have another one. He's a gentleman who grew up during the traditional society. If you look at the time he was born around 1931, the old order was still there. People wearing shukas, people were grazing cattle, as they had done for thousands of years.
Yes. Then
he went through colonialism, Mau Mau and so on. Then he saw Uhuru. And when we look at his success, we must look at it from that background.
Right.
That he had very deep experience that we shall never have ourselves. So by the time he became a finance minister, he had gone through all that. He had lived in 3 countries. So he was an intellectual, but a very down-to-earth intellectual.
Okay.
And that was the secret behind his. Okay. That was what was the secret behind his success.
I'll just cut you short for a moment right there. I do understand that we have Emmanuel To, who is with the former President Mwai Kibaki's son, Jimmy Kibaki. Let's just cross over and listen in. Over to you, To.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, we are joined here by the son of the late President Emilio Mwai Kibaki, who is also part of those people who are eulogizing this. Remember, when it hits hard at home. And we're joined with him here to speak to us live. Of course, sorry very much for the loss. Perhaps let's start with your message today. How is the process going on up to this point?
Well, you know, we are very grateful to President Uhuru Kenyatta. From the minute my father passed away, he has been very hugely supportive, and he gave on Friday, he gave express instructions to major arms of his government to give us every possible assistance, and up to now, and I'm sure even up to Saturday, they are going to be with us.
Okay. And what were his last words before he passed on? Because we know that you've said that there were instructions that he gave before he passed on.
No, from there, he didn't have any specific last words. You know, like I said, he had been ill for some time. So in the last 2 weeks or so, his health deteriorated. And he was at Nairobi Hospital with all his team of doctors monitoring him. But I think also age had a lot to do with it. So he really didn't have any last words as such. But you know, we thank God for his long life, because he was 90, and that was a long life.
Okay. And because we've seen many people, of course, mention some of the achievements that he's been able to achieve. You as a son, what do you think stood out for him in the 10 years he was president and the other years that he has been in government?
You see, from there, you know, the difference between a leader and a politician, and Mzee was a leader, is that a leader shows his people what they are capable of. So for a leader, it's never about him. It's about the people he is leading. And why people remember Mzee very fondly is because for those 10 years he was president, he showed Kenyans that if we work together, we can really transform this nation. He would be the first one to tell you that he is not the one who developed the economy of Kenya. Because an economy, he would tell you, an economy cannot be developed by one person. It is the Kenyans themselves who got together, got down to work, and rebuilt this economy from 2003, so that by 2007 we were growing at almost 8% per annum.
Okay. And maybe as we bring it to a close, because he was a hilarious man, he would make crack jokes across the country. As the son, did he used to do that at home as well? And how was he working with him or staying with him at home?
You know, Mzee was a larger-than-life figure. And he was a man of very many dimensions, very many facets. So the important thing for Kenyans to remember, he was not only a politician. He was a father, he was a businessman, he was a devout Catholic, he was a scholar, he was an educationist, he was a family man. So he was actually just a normal person who happened to have extraordinary talents. And those talents were deployed in the service of his country.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry for your loss.
Okay,
all right. Thank you so much. That has been Jimmy Wanjigi, the son of the late president, the retired president, Mwai Kibaki, saying that the president was a man who was larger than life. He was not just a president, but a father to them and the other kids that have been left behind after his passing on. I remember Mwai Kibaki is going to be laid to rest on Saturday at his home in Othaya, Nyeri County. But before that, the body continues to lie in state here in Parliament. Right now, as we speak, Kenyans are still streaming in. If you can see behind me, those are some of the Kenyans who are just walking in to have that glimpse and, of course, be part of just giving the third president of the Republic of Kenya, the last salute. Remember, this process started in the morning when President Uhuru Kenyatta officially kicked off this process by, of course, leading other senior government officials in viewing the body of the late president. And, of course, this process is going to continue for 3 days. We expected that today this process would have begun on time, and it did because of the military officers who are in charge. Remember, it is a military precision. Everything is done according to time. And by 5 p.m., about 4 hours or so, this process will be closed, and we'll also have another chance tomorrow for the Kenyans to also express their concerns and, of course, their messages to the late Mwai Kibaki. And, of course, we're here to give you a blow-by-blow cover of that, and, of course, we'll be giving you more updates as to when we receive them. Over to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Toh, for that. Of course, he was with the former and late President Mwai Kibaki's son, Jimmy Kibaki, who has remembered his father as a man of many layers and larger than life. We're going to say goodbye to our viewers on KTN Home, but we continue on with this coverage on KTN News. We take a look at the legacy of the former president, what he was as a man, his style of leadership, and much more. With my guest here in studio, just a quick reintroduction. We have Dr. Exen Iraqi, who was taking a look at the kind of life he led before getting into his career and politics. And also we have here with us governance and political expert Michael Agwanda. Dr. Exen, I cut you short earlier on before we cut to the former president's son and Emmanuel Toh right there in Parliament. You were speaking about the kind of background he had that formed the Mwai Kibaki that we all knew as president and leader. Go on.
And I think that's one of the things we forget when we look at the success of leaders.
Yes.
The experience they go through. So Kibaki went to the traditional society in the 1930s, the colonial period, and then the independence.
Yes.
And that shaped his views. Remember, he grew up in rural areas, then he came to urban areas. That was more experience.
Right.
He went to Uganda, then UK, and back to Kenya. That was more experience. So such experience shape your views and observations about how you should be read. And one of the things I've been looking forward to know is the books and the authors Kibaki read. Because I'm sure he was heavily influenced by Milton Friedman, who believed in market freedom.
Okay.
He was also influenced by John Maynard Keynes, who believed in government intervention.
Did you think this based on how he actually...
based on the economic decisions he made. Because he was able to give us economic freedom to pursue our economic interests, our businesses. That's how one time you found banks with tents on the streets telling us to come and get loans. And that's how he was able to come up with the big government projects that stimulated the economy. So I think he was a very louded up intellectual and also a very realistic reader. And we hope that those who will come after him will follow the same legacy. The only problem is whether they can get the same experience.
Okay, yeah, and that you can only get experience through experience.
Yes,
you cannot
yes.
buy it or
True.
get it from anywhere ready-made. Now, Mr. Agwanda, I'd like to take you to the point of transition, to a leader who's coming in, finding an economy that badly needs his influence as an economist, but at the same time to an environment that expected a lot out of him as president. Now, he shied away from the media and from the public and just got down to work. Take us back to that moment and how you view his leadership style.
In 2012, I was a returning officer in electoral commission then, and people voted, and people came out and voted in a way that Kenyans have never seen before.
True.
They thronged the polling stations, and it was a beautiful moment to see a transition that was coming. I mean, 2002, and we went to Uhuru Park, where the president was going to be inaugurated, and it was full to the brim. There was great excitement across the political divide. There was great excitement across the communities, tribe, creed, color, and we walked there in style, and we walked out of that place in style tricks. It was great hope, and that hope was not, in oblivion. It was a hope of reality, of a man that came in as an opposition leader, that also saw some of the few frustrations from a government that he served before, as a vice president. Now the president, him being the other side as an opposition leader, being oppressed, and for that reason he felt it all. He was a minister, he was assistant minister, he was a chairman of economics in this country. He became a member of parliament, and so he was in parliament for over 3 decades for that reason, and so he knew every bit of the operation of the government. And that was a big hope. It was a big hope that he also came into power when the division that was there between some communities and the government that was there then also gave him the support. And Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga came in and said Kibaki Tosha, and the whole country went into disarray and excitement, that an expectation that was never there before. Nobody expected Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga to say Kibaki Tosha. If anything, there were great plans and great preparation for Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga to say Nyachai Tosha. But then it shifted and went to Kibaki. But then, something happens. Honorable Mwai Kibaki gets an accident. And the accident sort of within that high expectation of maybe 90 to 100 to a level of about 50%, because he was not able to walk. Remember, he was inaugurated on a wheelchair. I remember seeing him, really being very, very close to him. And then when he went to State House as the president, things changed. Things changed because president was not in good health. Things changed because the president would have loved to run this country like his way of doing things, playing golf, and he would have loved to chase that ball and to find wherever it was. But he was not able to do that because he was on a wheelchair. Things changed because soon after that, there are people who decided that they will be more powerful than Kibaki himself, and that they will surround President Kibaki and make certain decisions sometimes that were not very nice. Our story is told of Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga trying to get to State House, and he will be told, no. Now it's a different environment altogether. You can't just walk in here like you were walking in here the other day. He's now the president, and protocol must be followed. And not just a protocol, there's now the State House controller that you must get an access to, and you must ask him whether the president wants to see you, whether the president says okay, and stuff like that. And suddenly people realize, even who are very close to the president, just a few days before his inauguration, that State House was not a place that they will just walk into, that things had changed. And I remember soon after that, there was great hope, because the biggest problem that this country had was that there was corruption.
Yes.
And the country was expecting that with the presidency of Honorable Mwai Kibaki, corruption will be stamped out immediately. I remember in Kisumu, for example, there were policemen on the roadside, and there were hopes that in this country, when President Mwai Kibaki becomes the president, is sworn in, that no policeman will ask for a bribe on the road. And what did the Kisumu people do? They made sure that the first vehicle that was stopped by a cop, and when that cop took the money, they came out, in fury, arrested the cop and took him to the police station and said, "This is not going to happen again because we have a new government."
Right, and I'd like to pause you on that bit of corruption, because that was his major approach even to reviving the economy, or rather setting it up, as it were. Dr. Exen.
I think we are discussing a very important reader in this country's history.
Yeah.
And although people have been saying that the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is an enigma, I think Kibaki was an enigma in his own way. Here is a gentleman who would play golf. And it's very easy to get that ball. Don't say it is very hard to get it. It's very easy to get it. And he still had time. Yes, that's true. He would play golf with his buddies, but still consider what an ordinary person needs to advance his economic well-being.
Right.
And one of the things that we forget is when Kibaki became the president, he made sure that you are given an opportunity to pursue whatever you think was good.
Yes.
And that's why he found businesses flourishing. Because he realized that the government can only do this, but the biggest part of the economy is spread by you and me.
Yeah.
And he gave us freedom to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very important observation that we forget when we think about his legacy. Number two, he was a very humble man, in my opinion. And it is strange that he has left us. And I have not seen any street in Nairobi named after him. I have not seen any university named after him.
Right.
And that probably reflects his humility. So by giving us freedom to do what we want and what we think we can pursue within the law, the country flourished.
Yes.
He gave us a new constitution that guaranteed our rights. And it is those small things that made all the difference. But I think the biggest lesson we need to learn from Kibaki is that no matter who you are, you can reach your full potential. From a town boy, from a very rural boy, he became the president of this country. And I think what we need to tell Kenyans is that what people lack is not ability, it's opportunities.
For sure.
And when we gave him opportunity, he reached his full potential. And that's what the current leader should be doing, giving that small boy, that small young girl, opportunity to be what they are. It doesn't matter whether you are an A student or a B student or an E student. Let's give you an opportunity to be what you are.
Right.
And I think that's what President Kibaki did.
Now, the president was hands off, as you have said, but had a very low tolerance, as was expected, to corruption. And that was one of the major problems that the country was facing. What is your view of how he handled it? And do you think we have retrogressed, or have we built up on what he was able to accomplish in his fight against graft?
Even though the president did not live to the expectation of the people on matters of economy, matters of corruption, matters of electoral justice, I strongly believe that during his tenure, the country grew in economy. The country was able to attract a lot of international investors. The country was able to grow in terms of GDP, and there was an amicable environment to do business in this country. But if you ask me about his second term, the second term was riddled with things that perhaps we should not have associated with the gentleman that has been called for generation and generation a gentleman. If you read the legacy of Mwai Kibaki, you'll be told that from the time immemorial, he did not engage on funny chit-chat and backbiting one another, talking about people, that he wanted matters that involves issues of economics, issues of planning, issues of development, things that will matter to other people's life. That it was not a man that was he was not a simpleton. It was a man that will engage on matters of great importance for the nation. Right. And this is carried, and he was known as a gentleman, that if you are found to have been that mediocre individual around him, even within the cabinets, as people write, says that if Kibaki, if you are minister and you said something so foolish that he didn't even want to follow, he will just ignore it. He will not even talk about it. He will assume that you never spoke, and then go ahead and speak about an idea that was brilliant and was thrown on the floor. And I think there are cases where, when he was in Parliament, he ridiculed people and said he's not even worth being a minister because of the way he's talking. And it was forthright. He spoke his mind. But then you look at what happened in 2007, and you say the devil visited the country. The devil visited the gentleman. And sometimes in government and in governance, sometimes it's not just the leader doing things.
Right,
but if you are the head, then you have to be in control of what is around you. And so when the devil visited the president and the gentleman at that time, it was not a very nice time in this country.
Indeed.
But then what happened after that, and within the 5 years of his, the government of coalition and a government that was brokered by the international community, our brothers from United Nations and many other countries, what happened? It was a nice 5 years walk. And I think he also allowed an environment of hands-off, but you see, to a country that needs to grow, you cannot claim that hands-off is a strategy of management. It is never a strategy of management. It's a sign of saying, I've given up and I'll let things just run the way they are. And then when 2013 came and the new government came into place, they found a government that was divided. They found a government that seemed to have been together, but it was just limping because, there was a coalition government here, and there's a president and a prime minister that perhaps looked like it was forced into the president's docket. And so you find a cabinet that was working in disunity. And when they came in, they thrive in that disunity. They did it so well that they brought us from whatever we had done in matters of development, whatever we'd done in matters of growth, whatever we'd done in matters of corruption in this country, just came into full blown. And it will take the next president 5 years to seal the holes that has been damaged in the last 10 years, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. But then, now that you've brought us to that level, I'd like you to explain to us that flourishing that happened when he took power, economically speaking, right? And then we have the PEV, post-election violence, that seemed to undo all the good, or a lot of the good that had been gained by the Kibaki administration. And then now this new government, that is a coalition government, is faced with the task of rebuilding and regaining the things that had been lost. And of course, there are those rifts that Mr. Agwanda is describing. What did that do to Kenya?
Let's first of all remember that President Mwai Kibaki took over government that was very different from the previous government.
Indeed.
If you remember, President Mwai's government was very centralized, and everything was controlled from the center. So one of the things that we expected from Mwai Kibaki was the center would be controlled, would release, so that people would have freedom to do what they want. But as my colleague put it, we were not sure how far we should let the forces, the centrifugal forces, move. And I think he let the forces move too far. That's how we ended up having post-election violence. And it was a very big blot on his legacy. Remember, we had post-election violence, but the economy was booming, and the economy was doing very well. And it is a lesson for the future leaders that is not just about the economy, but you also must have looked at our social setup.
Matters like cohesion.
Yes, because when the economy is doing very well, it usually does well because there's competition. People are becoming innovative. And that creates some forces that can tear the country apart. So it was unfortunate that it happened. And whatever we got after that was a coalition government. And we seem to be talking about coalition ever since that time. But let's be fair to President Kibaki, because he cannot tell us what happened. But I think we are not told about the whole story of what happened during the post-election violence, because it took a very long time. A lot of wealth was destroyed, a lot of people suffered, and a lot of people are still suffering. But I think it's a lesson that next time you think about economic progress, also think about everybody.
Yeah.
And finally, about Kibakis, I think he was a very thoughtful person. And not just in Parliament, but outside. I remember one time finding him in Vet Lab Golf Club around 4 p.m., sitting alone. Nobody was greeting him.
Right.
I wish I had taken a selfie with him. And he was just looking at people playing golf, looking at the sunset. And that probably reflects his personality.
Yes.
Or is reflective. He had no time for petty issues. I'm told even those who played golf with him, he was also very serious. But I think at the end of the day, he was also human. So we should not be very harsh on him.
For sure. Absolutely. But then there's an element that you brought up earlier on whereby you said that he did not focus on the softer issues such as cohesion, right? Now, when you look at the current leadership, what do you think we are not learning from that? Because we've just seen the nominations that have happened, the primaries, the parties are going at it, candidates trying to get tickets, and we seem to not have learned entirely about including everyone when it comes to democracy, the Kenyan kind, actually.
I think the problem we have here, Trix, is very simple. How do you balance personal interest and national interests? When the politicians sit on the public podium, they tell us they are protecting national interest. They are furthering national interest. But deep inside, they also have their personal interest.
For sure.
And a good leader should be able to balance both. I think everybody has personal interest, but should be able to balance both national and personal interest. For example, and I don't support any political party, me, I'm just an observer. I think consensus is not a very good method of getting people who will go to parliament, who will go to senate, or whoever, who is going to be represented.
Yes.
It is a wananchi who should decide who will be representative. So I think based on that, we have not learned from the past. Because people should remember one thing, and my friend put it very well. When you go to vote, you vote against some people and for some people. And that gives us a chance to express our anger. I voted against him.
Yes.
I voted for him. So if we don't let people release that anger, it can be expressed in another way.
Boils over, basically.
Yes. So I think we need to run from post-election violence so that future nomination, whether they are primary or whichever, are democratic. And everybody has an equal chance to become a leader.
Okay. Mr. Gwanda, you, I'm sure, can speak about this matter more clearly because it's close to heart.
And as a former returning officer.
Yes, the former returning officer, someone who's going for a ticket to vie. What do you feel? Do you feel that we have learned from our past and have we changed the way we do things to be more inclusive and more democratic, even at the party level?
My friend and I have had an opportunity to study abroad, and more specifically in the US.
Yes.
And we're talking about the economy of a nation. We're talking about matters of the growth, of the economic growth of a nation. And then we are talking about the politicians as well as the executives. And in Kenya, there is a competition between the executive and the politicians, but not the experts. In fact, in Kenya, the experts come a fifth in that line. That's when we'll call the economists and say, hey, come here and tell us what you think. And then once they bring their brilliant way of looking at things, I saw what Professor Ndi did many years to the other politicians, and then they take it. And when they take it, they run with that information. When they run with that information, they are not coming back to the source of that information. They think with one-day explanation and demographic explanation on the board, they already have the information and they can run and implement it. And then they kick out the experts, who are the economists, and then they say, now we'll run with it. And then when they run with it, it is a disaster. That is what we've not learned in this country. In the developed countries, the politicians are left to make laws in the interests of the people. The politicians are allowed to be loud enough when things are not going right. The politicians are allowed to oversight, but who does the job? It is the civil servants that does the job in the interests of the people. When a community, for example, has an environment where somebody is coming to build a 20 flat and they feel that this place only needs 2 flats in it, they will go to court and court will listen to them. Their politician will listen to them. But their politician will not be in bed with the developer because they will tell the developer, these are the people that are living in this community. If they don't want the 20 building story here, you look for other place to do it. And for your information, I am a politician, I represent them. And if I represent them, whatever they say, that's what I go with.
Sure.
Not an environment where the politician becomes the economist, become the public health expert, he becomes the doctor in the community, and the politician decides on your fate, even up to where you're supposed to be buried. Oh, that's what is facing this country. Right. And I think that is where the problem that is the problem this country is facing. Now let's come to where the rain is beating everybody that is called a politician. A lady, Fatuma in Migori, cried her heart out and said, I sold my house, 25 million gone, but I've won and still taken away from me. What a sad cry from a woman. And I was involved in that political fiasco called the nomination of a party in this country. And I have realized that we are not learning anything in this country because we've allowed politicians to carry the day in every aspect of it. In our democratic space, within the IBC space, within the nomination space, we've allowed them to infringe on matters of economics, even though some of them left in Form 4, but they will speak about economics as if they've written a paper about it. And yet there is no Form 4 person that has written a paper about economics in this country. And so when we continue to leave things to the politicians who do not understand the concept and issues that pertains to the development of a nation merely because they were elected. And I like what Professor Lumumba said, that even if you elect an individual that is illiterate and semi-literate, and then the next day you call him and say, can you talk about this matter because you are our leader, he will not suddenly become a smart person to say anything that is meaningful but foolishness in whatever topic you've given to him. I strongly believe that nomination in this country is perhaps a trade. It's a trade for people to get money. It is a moment for lawyers to get money. And let me tell you what, in the suffering of those men and women that really want to make a difference in this country, if we cannot change how we're doing nomination in this country, we'll see many people get into parliament, into the Senate, into governor through independent this time around than any other time in the history of our country. All
right. Now, Dr. Exeni Raki, I do believe that you, of course, this hits close to home when it comes to the issue of technocrats, and you have written about the legacy of the former president, and you have mentioned that he relied on and expert as opposed to, you know, whatever the other politicians rely on. Even as a young Treasury cabinet minister, he would rely on technocrats and, you know, employed liberal reforms to Treasury. Explain to us why it is very important not to ignore expertise as the former president did, and what did this do for him as a president? How did this open doors and make things better?
Before we go to experts, let me respond what he said about politician and expertise.
Yes.
Because there's one thing we have really ignored in the Kenyan Constitution, which would do us a lot of good. I don't know which section of the Constitution, but public participation is entrenched in our Constitution.
Indeed.
That whatever major decision you have to make, you need to bring public to participate and put their input.
For sure.
But we have not educated the public or the voters that they have such power. And that's why politicians do what they want. Because anybody given freedom will do what he wants. So I think we need to educate the voters so that when a decision is being made, they don't say it is them. It's not enough to vote somebody to parliament. You need to follow up. And number two, I think we have a major problem he pointed out, that everybody wants to become a politician. Now, somebody who owns a brewery wants to become a politician. Somebody who owns a captain of the industry wants to become
But isn't that democracy?
It's democracy, but
yes.
If we all become politicians, who will be running those industries?
For sure.
Because, as he put it, let experts do what they're supposed to do. Because I can be a very good economist without going to parliament. I can be a very good medical doctor without going to parliament. And what we might think is you are going to parliament or to Senate or an MCA because you want to change things. but sometimes you just want to protect your interests. So let's go back to President Kibaki. Why I think using experts made a lot of difference, and that's what you're saying.
Yes. Because
experts are usually very objective. So when they give you some advice on what to do, whether it's about hospital, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about the roads, whether it's about a project, they're very objective. So you're likely to be more successful when you rely on experts and people's whims.
Right.
And if you look at his cabinet, the PSs and so on, they were experts. And I think that's why he was able to be heard of and things were still done. Because the people he entrusted with that work knew what they were supposed to do. I'm not saying the other presidents are not doing the same or have not been doing the same, but to a large extent, that's why he was very successful. He left experts do their work and he gave them freedom.
Absolutely.
And they were able to be innovative and to be creative. And I hope that can become a culture of the government.
Absolutely. And of course, does that also build confidence in when it comes to business and trade and the market, when you have a government that seems to be working based on expertise as opposed to the noise that we often hear?
If I was a foreign investor or if I wanted to invest some money somewhere,
yes,
and I come to a government office, and I ask somebody who is in charge of a certain department, what is Kenya's GDP growth rate? And they ask me, what is GDP? Or ask him, how many people in the government or in Kenya work in the public and private sector? He's not sure of. But when he gives me information that I need, and then I'll gain confidence. And I know that if I bring some money here, if I start a project here, I'll be in safe hands.
It is safe.
So the moment you have experts, people feel they have confidence in the economy, they have confidence in leadership, and they're able to bring even more resources.
Right.
Because they believe that what they are doing is right, they'll be protected.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the right thing to do. Let's have experts do their work, and then we recognize them. Because a lot of experts do a lot of work, but we never recognize them.
Okay.
Like the way we recognize politicians.
Okay, and speaking of recognition, his legacy looms large in infrastructure. I'd like you to weigh in on that as well, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Gwanda. Speak to us about what that did for our markets, our economy, even just, in general, for his legacy.
I think I see President Kibaki's legacy in two ways. There is a visible legacy and an invisible legacy.
Okay.
The visible legacy are things like highways, ports, and railways and so on. That's something that you can see. And the moment you put such good infrastructure, you improve the productive capacity of the economy. You can save money moving from point A to B. You can stop your produce from going bad. Yes. And you can get your business from point A to B. So the infrastructure is the nervous system of a country. But you cannot succeed economically just by having physical infrastructure. You must look at the invisible legacy of Mwai Kibaki. One of them, which we forget very often, is national confidence. After he came to power, Kenyans became very confident. Wherever they go in the world, I was feeling I'm a good Kenyan. Yes. And that's a very good economic stimulus. The other invisible legacy is education. That very many kids were now able to go to school. And when you have educated people, then they are more productive. Right. They can become entrepreneurial. They can seek opportunities wherever they can be in the world. But of course, the third one is health. People became healthy, and healthy people are more productive. For sure. So let's look at his legacy in terms of what we can see and what we can't see. We cannot see. The only problem is that most politicians would prefer their legacy to be in concrete, so that you can see a big project somewhere. Point at it and say, this is what I did. But it should also be soft. Things that we can't see, like educated people, healthy people, and optimistic people. Absolutely. Now, I'd like to bring this over to you, Mr. Gwanda. The matter of free primary education gave him recognition the world over, not just here in Kenya, although it came under criticism later on based on how the ministry was running this project. But of course, it was a good thing that continues to be a good thing in some ways. Now, speak to us about that part of his legacy. I think President Kibaki had a brilliant idea of ensuring that that all kids in this country are able to go to school regardless of their background. Yeah. And I think it's something that was closer to home, because looking at the history of their family, 5 siblings, and none of them went to school, but it was the last one. And so they decided, let's have this kid go to school and sacrifice whatever might have been given to us for this smart kid to go to school. And he ended up becoming the President of the Republic of Kenya, because he also did
really, really well in academia world. And so I strongly believe that that's something he realized, that if he had not had an opportunity to go to school, now in this case, some people sacrifice the opportunity to go to school for him to go to school. Now, him thinking that every kid needed to go to school and that free primary needed to be initiated in this country, to me was a brilliant idea. I also believe that the idea was so good for the implementers to even implement.
Was it ahead of his time, do you think?
I think he had a brilliant idea, and free primary education came in very handy. But then things started changing. Things started changing by kids being told, now you're not paying school fees. No, we're not paying school fees. Oh, but you need to pay something little for us to build a classroom.
Yes.
Oh, you need to
Lunch.
pay money for lunch. And then, you also need to pay for exam fee. Until just the other day, in President Uhuru's tenure, when the exam fee was waived, but we still need to pay for exam fee.
Absolutely.
And so when the experts and the international community are, saying that Kenya had free primary education, I run a private school.
Yeah.
I have kids, and I run an agency, an NGO that pays school fees to children who are coming from deprived community, and I've done that for the last 20 years.
Yes.
And I know that in those public schools where most of our children go to, we still have to pay money. And not just that, but the things that I've mentioned, but there are many kids in this school.
It's not school fees in the traditional sense,
yeah,
but then...
So there are many kids in this school, so you have to pay something extra for teachers to do tuition. Until the other day when C.S. Magua came out and said, you know what, this is not to discredit the brilliant idea that Honorable Kibaki had, but I'm just saying that perhaps it was too good for the implementers. And so they devised other ways. And being that the president was also a sort of a hands-off, brings an idea and wants everybody to run with it because they are employed to do that, he let them to run with it. But I tell you, we had more problems in school at that particular time than any other time. We had more kids coming to school, and about 100 to 150 kids, there's a school called Migosi Primary School where there was close to 200 kids in one classroom. Then as you think about this huge number, and you're not thinking about how do we make sure that we cope up with the teaching fraternity in terms of numbers so that these kids can also get a huge benefit in terms of time with the teachers. How do we think very quickly of how we can add more classrooms so that when everybody goes to school, they can find a space for them? And so I like the idea, and the idea that can be implemented. But I just think that idea was not in sync with the teaching fraternity, and to a point where it could be implemented.
Are we facing the same issue with the CBC, you think?
I have seen the minister, the CS Minister of Education, trying to really bring in new things, complement and supplement some of the bottlenecks that they've been having, hiring new teachers. We've seen that happening. We've seen them saying we're going to build 10,000 classrooms, and we've seen also him saying every school needs to get a title deed. Why? Because some of the schools, their properties are being hived off by land grabbers and so forth and so on. What I'm saying is it is a work in progress. We need to get to the bottom of this matter. Why is it that in developed countries like in America and other places, kids still go to public school without uniform? Remember, and I say this as I conclude on this matter because it hurts, and this is what I do every day. Remember, if you're taking a child to school today, the Form 1s are being taken to school, in the next few days. A child who's being taken to school, the school fees might be 25,000 that you have to report with, but what is in the requirement sheet will be 35,000 because, but you have to buy them tricks from one specific vendor, and that specific vendor has a deal with the principal. These kind of things must stop. And if we continue talking about them and we continue saying 100% transition from primary to secondary school, we are lying to ourselves while we know very well that ordinary ordinary person in this country that perhaps may be living in the village will not be able to afford 35,000 shillings of shopping that you pay direct, and you don't get a receipt from some of the schools when you're doing that.
Absolutely, Dr. X. And would you like to weigh on that?
Yes.
Brilliant ideas, poor implementation. Big problem.
I think he is talking as a parent. That's why you're saying all
and
that.
And the school owner.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, before I came to this studio, as a parent, I went to buy some books for the school opening tomorrow. And I have a bill here, about 14,000. So what you're saying is right, that you'll be told the fees is 40,000. But when you pile up what you pay in terms of books, in terms of things like something very popular, uniform, it becomes very expensive. But I think the reason why President Kibaki focused so much on free education is because he was a benefit of free education.
For sure.
He could never become a president of who he became because without getting a good education.
Yeah.
I think that's why he was very passionate about it. But I want to correct my friend and Kenyans that there's nothing like free education. Somebody pays for it. So if Kenyans want a good education, they should pay more taxes.
Yeah.
So that money is used to build schools and so on. Because you cannot get money out of nothing.
Yes.
And beyond free education, we also need to focus on quality. What do those young men and those kids study in school? Like personally, I want more kids to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Yes.
Because those are job creators. I'm not saying we should not study arts, but that's where innovation and manufacturing and jobs come in. So we need to go beyond just taking kids to school, but what they study. You mentioned something about CBC.
Yeah.
I think we need to debate more about CBC because, in my opinion, not enough was discussed about CBC. It's being implemented. The minister had said it has to go on. The train has left the station.
Yeah.
But I think I talked again about public participation. It is our children who go through CBC.
Yeah.
So we should not keep quiet if we talk about it. If we see something is not right, let's talk about it. Let's improve on it.
It should, shouldn't the ministry be awake? I know we are digressing a bit from the subject, but shouldn't the ministry be awake to even the mood and the conversations surrounding this? Because as much as there are not opportunities or citizens are not accorded that enough opportunity for participation, we have platforms, social media. Kenyans are making jokes and voicing their opinion about why they feel this is not working in the best ways. Why isn't our governance systems awake to the mood on the ground?
That's a good question because Kenyans express their views on social media.
Yeah.
But if you call them for public participation on an issue, they don't turn up.
show up. Yeah, that's true.
So we need to be on the ground. If there's a meeting, a town hall meeting and so on, let's go there and give our views. Remember that sometimes the people who make decisions at the highest level are not in tune with what happens on the ground. And a good example I can give you is what is happening with consensus. The people at the top are saying, let's have consensus. It is easier. But they are not aware of what happens on the ground. So as a parent, we should be very conscious of what is happening in schools. Remember, most parents are not rich enough to take their kids to alternative systems like GCE. Their kids will have to go through the existing system.
Yeah.
And that is why it is also important for them to go and vote. So you vote somebody who think will take care of your interest when you're taking care of their interests. But I think education, CBC came after 844. There was something before that. And I think each system should be an improvement of the previous one. So it will be very, very sad if we start complaining about CBC when we complained about 844, we complained about the previous one. Remember, if I go through a bad education system, I will not go back to school because a new one has come. So we need to be very focused on that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about taxation. There's a difference in the way this was handled. Taxes were handled during the Kibaki era, whereby there was less borrowing, and of course there was less expenditure at the same time. Speak to us about that and what that did for Kenya as a country.
It was one of the Kenya's economy's golden moments when about 95% of the budget was funded by internal sources. And that is one of the sources of Kenyan pride, that you're able to sponsor our government, you're able to take care of ourselves. And what President Kibaki did was to make sure that he stopped the leakage in tax correction. Okay. Because tax was being corrected and disappearing. And also he made sure that people pay taxes. And I think tax correction went up by 3 times. So if you collect more taxes, it means you are not going to borrow. If you're not going to borrow from other people, it means you have less conditions attached to the money that you have. It means you can make better decisions. and what the economy did very well. So he also made it feel good that it is something patriotic to pay taxes.
For sure.
And if you remember, there are a lot of statements from KRA, Ripa Ushuru, something else. And for the first time, Kenyans felt that paying tax is not a burden, something to be proud of. Now, when you borrow money from people, even the Bible says, you become the slave of that person.
Yeah.
So when we borrow money from other institutions, we become their slave. And I think that was a very good direction the country was taking. Because if we have our own money, we can decide what to do with it. And without any pressure, we are likely to make good decisions. And you saw what was happening: free education, better medical services, economic growth, and so on. And I hope we can go back to that by living within our means.
Absolutely, living within our means. What do you view about that? Because there's a lot of talk right now about the high cost of living. And these are some of the things that the former president was able to tackle in one way or another with his way of handling taxes. And of course, even just bringing about an atmosphere where you feel patriotic enough to want to be a part of the building blocks of the development of the country. Compare and contrast, and give us your view of that time.
Light and day, totally light and day. What has happened in the last 10 years compared to Kibaki's last 10 years is light and day. It's a big difference in terms of issues of economy and taxes. I don't think people fear paying taxes, but people want to see what their taxes do.
Yes.
And I think it's a legitimate question from an economic point of view, that if I pay you this much money, can I see it back? And so long as somebody is paying money, but it doesn't seem to see it back, even within its surrounding, they'll try to avoid to pay taxes.
Yeah.
During Kibaki time, there was an aspect of a resemblance of their taxes working. Not much borrowing, but you could see that the government was running.
Right.
I think that was even the time when President Uhuru Kenyatta was actually the finance minister.
Oh, yes.
And he was humbled to go in public and tell people that, now we will not drive our Guzzlers. Now we will drive our Passat. And they all went and bought the Passat.
Yes.
And I don't know what happened to President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
As soon as he got into power, he forgot about the Passat, and today
back to the Guzzlers.
Even an undersecretary will be driving a Guzzler in this town. And not just a Guzzler, but he will be having a chain of, motorcade for security and stuff like that.
It was very practical, even,
Yeah. And so to Kibaki, that was a waste. It is a waste because I compare Kibaki's time when I was, and Moi's time. When Moi came to Kisumu, where I used to go to school in primary school, I think the only thing that we wanted to see was not Moi, but the motorcade.
For sure.
Man, it will be hundreds of vehicles, and they'll be zooming at a speed that you cannot imagine.
Yeah.
But this time, Mwai Kibaki came to Kisumu, and he had a function, I think, at the showground, and he was alone in his car, and there were no many vehicles that were following him.
Yeah.
I think he was a modest person in the sense that he also wanted Kenyans to, enjoy what they work hard for and not to enjoy the splendor of things that they could not account for. But today, as we look at individuals in this town, you find a simple junior clerk, for example, the one that was working at NHIF office, a cleaner that was hiring a chopper to his house in Kitengela. You can imagine, the pump. And that's the other day we are talking about a 400 million, a cleaner within, the ministry, prisons, a cleaner within the prisons, transacting over 220-something million within a short time. And you're wondering, where did this come from?
Right.
I think President Mwai Kibaki did one brilliant thing.
Yeah.
To stop financial pilferage and to stop financial theft. The wanton financial theft that we saw during, President, the late president's tenure, Moi, for a short time when people had so much money, and then he stopped it. He stopped it, and you could see that people were living within their means when President Mwai Kibaki was in government. And then as soon as his tenure was over, people picked over from what they left during President Mwai's time. And today, you come to Nairobi and you'll be amused that a cleaner will be transacting over 200 million in his pocket. That a clerk will be transacting in NHIF over millions and hiring a chopper which costs about 500,000, you know, for a few hours in a day. That is the life to me that I will remember Kibaki with. You know, with other things that we can talk about, but I think he made Kenyans live within their means, and that grew the economy. When it comes to matters of growing the economy in terms of international exchange and forex and trade in this country, I think Kenyans did better business during Kibaki's time than even Uhuru's time. Because today, when you import a car from Japan, for example, and it comes in this country, and you pay about $5,000 of the cost of that car, you'll probably be paying twice the amount of that money in terms of taxes only. Why would you do that? And this is a second-hand car that, if anything, you're expected just to use for about a few years, and then you can buy another car. We are in a state where if the next president does not look at the economy in this country and the taxes in this country that are choking Kenyans every single day, then I am telling you, it is just a matter of time before Kenyans get up in arms and say, this cannot continue again. We must check this issue of taxes, but most importantly, our taxes seem to be paying for our debts.
Yeah.
And in fact, the allegation is, even those kids that are now yet to be born, they're just still in the womb. They already have a tag in terms of a debt that they're going to pay. We cannot allow this, and we have to stop this. And we cannot continue driving a country by thinking that if we increase the taxes, we're going to get more money and grow.
And that brings the conversation back to the fight against corruption, because some of the things you are mentioning are things that wouldn't be happening if the war on graft had been successful. And another thing you have mentioned that I think is very important is the fact that picking up from the bad habits that we had stopped and then carrying them forward. Dr. Iraki, I'd like you to let's talk about Vision 2030, right? We are in a transition year, and we also have the Big Four agenda, right? So democracy naturally dictates that we should transition from one leader to the other by virtue of people voting for their preferred candidate. But at the same time, there are these grand plans that span longer than 10 years that each president has put in place. What do you make of the fact that you see the Mwai Kibaki era had Vision 2030? Right now we're having the Big Four agenda. Perhaps the next president will have their own long-term plan. What assurances can even Kenyans have that as presidents move and transition, we're going to still have momentum when it comes to some of these plans that are actually good, if you look at them?
I think we are discussing a very important debate. We have discussed very important issues because we are going beyond the late President Mwai Kibaki to after.
Yeah.
And I like the point my friend raised about how he was able to tap or to cross the taps of pilferage. When President Mwai Kibaki became the president, I remember stopping at Gilgilway Bridge. And I talked to those ladies who sell chocolate and yogurt and so on.
Yeah.
And I greeted them just by accident. And I remember one of them saying, "Kwani pesa ilienda wapi?" And one girl told me, during Kanu era, there was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that really sent me thinking, why could there be no money when the economy is doing very well? And it's a very clear indicator there was a lot of money that was leaking out.
Yes.
And I think President Mwai Kibaki was able to do that. And I think one thing that he knew which sectors of the economy mattered and which one to focus on. And that's why his decisions had a very big impact on growth. On something he mentioned about the display of power, I think that's a big issue in this country, because when I went to the US like him, I don't remember the US president who is ahead of a superpower in nuclear weapons displaying the type of power we display in Africa. Just simple motorcade.
Yeah.
And I think we need to stop using cars as a show of power. I can be very powerful by walking around.
Yeah.
And even by driving a bit. And let's also be fair to President Kibaki and the people who came after him. Remember, after President Mwai Kibaki left office, we got devolution. And the government became bigger and had to coordinate. And you'll see how the counties and the government have been fighting over how to share resources, not how to generate them. And I think that has been a very big drag on the economy, where people fight how do we share, not how we generate that. Now to your question.
Yeah.
Sorry, before I finish, you said people should go up in arms because they are very annoyed. We don't need to take arms. Just vote well.
Vote right.
Vote right in August. We shall solve the problem.
Okay.
Vision 2030. I am very proud to tell Kenyans that I participated in. I was invited by the former Nyeri governor, Wahome Gakuru, who was spearheading Vision 2030, and I remember editing quite a number of pages of that document. So I studied very well. And the Vision 2030 was supposed to be independent of the regime. It doesn't matter who is the president. They should continue implementing it. And true, when President Uhuru came to power, he came up with the Big Four. But if you have read Vision 2030, he just picked a bit of Vision 2030 and called it the Big Four. All the Big Four are in Vision 2030. Okay. So he is not deviating very much from Vision 2030.
The original plan.
I think what he decided is that some sections of Vision 2030 are more urgent and they need to be implemented now.
Yeah.
And I guess even the next president who will come in August, he'll have no choice but to present or to continue implementing Vision 2030. Okay. I personally would be very happy to see Vision 2030 realized in my lifetime. But it's also high time we revised it and maybe came up with Vision 2040 or Vision 2060.
Build on it.
African Union has Agenda 2063,
yes,
which is very futuristic, and maybe we need to start borrowing from it and injecting that into Vision 2030.
So do you think then in his fight against corruption, in his strategy to build up the economy, that he, or is it unrealistic to expect that he would have set it up the same way he set up the plan for Vision 2030, in a way that it might have to supersede the different regimes that would take on power after him?
When I look at Vision 2030, I think we focused too much on the economic part of it. Right. We forgot the human aspect. We forgot that Vision 2030 will be implemented by human beings, with their prejudices, with their interests, and so on. And it's not unique to Vision 2030. Even other projects we have in the government, we often forget the human factor. Look at the express highway here.
Yes.
Very good road, but it is human beings who've been living there with their greed, with their prejudice, and so on. So anytime you have a big project like Vision 2030 or Big Four, let's always remember that the most important factor is a human being. And that's why I probably think our next president should be a psychologist.
A psychologist.
Because human behavior has become very critical
yes,
now.
because the economists did the thing with the economy. Perhaps a psychologist need to dig deeper into the matters of cohesion, and especially given the mood that we are in, the political mood. Speak to us about where you see Kenya going as far as cohesion and democracy, and of course how we're going to vote in power, or even how we accept transition.
Oh, Trix, I don't know if I want to give you that answer, because my answer may not be very good.
It's okay.
But you know, in matters of cohesion and democracy in this country, I only see two classes, the rich and the poor. My biggest problem, as you're saying, is that we seem not to care what happens around us. Even when we're talking about national cohesion matters, we're talking about democracy matters. And the next thing they ask, oh, but do you have the money? That's the next thing they ask.
Yeah, that's where the conversation goes.
Right. And now the voters themselves have been so sensitized that in some places you go there, professor, and they say, no, we know you, professor. We know you want to be an MP. But before you talk, we are lining up. We are lining up. So, you know, the friend of mine was running for a governor, and this guy has told him, as we line up here before we talk to him.
Yes.
And so they lined up, and he gave them money, and then he had some calendars, and then what surprised him in the middle of the whole process is as he gave the money, the guys disappeared. So he started thinking, but when I'm done, who am I going to talk to?
Yeah.
So we are having a country where basically people do not care about national cohesion, people do not care about infrastructure and service development, people do not care about what is happening. They care about the politician, and they care about the rich person who will give them the money. Hence the drive of getting this money no matter what, however it comes. And we got to change this thought process. And we got to change this through, the best way to change it is to go to schools and start training our kids who are young up to adolescence age, so that they know that it's right for you to have not, but still be a person of integrity, so that they know that when somebody else is suffering, it's just a matter of time before they come for you. That when somebody is attacked in your neighborhood and you don't respond, it is a matter of time before they come after you. But when we want to judge people by what they drive, you know, how they present themselves, how their bling bling look like, and how better they are than others, you know, how we want to, you know, invest huge, and Kibaki brought in a lot of huge projects in this country, but you never heard of this exorbitant top-up where a project like what we have here, being estimated to be about 50 billion, goes to about 80 billion. I know my economist friend here don't want to discuss issues because sometimes you have to border issues of politics and look at them critically and say, is it worth it by having another 50 million on top of it? Because that's theft in itself. When we bring these projects, do we want to have people, and I like his idea, bring people, also have people issues involved in this development, so that we don't just think of projects and not people.
I'll pause you right there. We're going to cut across to, we'll cut to Parliament right now, whereby Kenyans are queuing to view the remains of former President Mwai Kibaki. And